Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Karen Corman, and I have the privilege. Very exciting afternoon as you are all part of our inaugural event within our new series, the UIC Alumni Exchange. And through the UIC Alumni Exchange, we'll be hosting weekly events that bring you news, knowledge, and entertainment to help you explore, connect, and even escape from the everyday with a community of UIC alumni and faculty experts. You may hear me say this a few times today, but I encourage you to visit go.uic.edu/alumni exchange for the latest and greatest programming. A few housekeeping rules before we get started today. You may have noticed that when you came in, all participants are muted, but we certainly encourage you to keep your cameras on. If you have questions throughout, please put them in the chat box and we'll get to as many of them as we can. The presenters have left time for Q&A. And I know people are continuing to join, so please be welcome as you come in. Please be aware that the session is being recorded and it will be available afterwards at the UIC Alumni Exchange website. We also would recommend that for Zoom, you stay in speaker view, which you can select in the upper right-hand corner, because it's always better to see faces. And finally, you will receive a 30-second survey after the presentation. It only takes 30 seconds, I promise. Please do let us know your thoughts as it helps us for future programming. And with that, I'm excited to start our program this afternoon, Finding Joy at a Distance. We are grateful to our two excellent presenters, and we'll start first by turning it over to Lisa Salvadore, who is a visiting lecturer in the UIC Jane Addams College of Social Work. Thank you so much for being here, Lisa.
Visiting lecturer at the UIC Jane Addams College of Social Work. I've been on faculty about 5 years, and I also have a private therapy practice out in the suburbs in Bloomingdale. I've been working in mental health for a very long time. Excuse me. Okay, so if you are ready, we'll begin. The 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, I think there's no doubt that we are involved in a crisis, and this crisis is clearly widespread. It is impacting us as individuals, as families, as communities, as a country, and really as a global united world. I wanted to start off with a definition of what a crisis is. So a crisis is a stressful time in life when we experience a breakdown or disruption in our usual or normal daily activities or family functioning. So these are things that we don't really anticipate. Along with that, there's extreme emotional stress or strain that could lead to anxiety. And for many people, they do experience anxiety related to these types of events. Crisis events override normal bodily and mental abilities, meaning how we experience things. And as a result, we're going to experience things differently. Overall, the uncertainty, the unanswered questions facing us in a crisis can be really overwhelming. When we experience more straightforward crisis, something similar to like an accident or a natural disaster, we kind of have a start and a stop on the crisis experience. And it makes it a little bit easier to kind of move forward with your emotions and with what's going on. But with COVID-19, this is kind of an ongoing crisis that is changing as we go from day to day. There's things are changing rapidly. Essentially what it does is it knocks us off balance a little bit. It really disrupts our sense of control. So how we respond to a crisis can be a lot of different ways. There are instantaneous physiological, more physical, hormonal, and emotional changes that occur. There's the fight or flight response. This is increased blood and adrenaline flow that allows us to fight off a perceived threat or allows us to be able to actually flee to safety. There's the emotional response, experiencing shock, kind of a numbness, disoriented, a slowed response, if you will. People experience deep sadness. There's feelings of loss and grief. A third way is cognitive response. So this is really more of an intellectual or kind of how we think about things. And as a result, it contradicts the views of ourself and our safety. We start to wonder, is it safe to walk around the block? Is it safe to go to the grocery store? Is it safe to walk up to the Walgreens? Previously, we would not have really given thought to thinking about safety in those same ways. All of this results in our psychological balance being disrupted, and our usual coping is not working like it previously did. And what I mean by that is we may not be able to kind of shake off some of those thoughts that we have about, oh, it'll be okay. Nothing's really going to happen to me. Right now, those are much more kind of ingrained because everything is so different. We may not be able to effectively reassure ourselves. So some common experiences and feelings, these are essentially changes in our emotions and our mental abilities. Things may be more effort, much more of a struggle for people. So shock, feeling numb, again, decreased concentration, inability to focus or difficulty with attention span. People are going to struggle with being able to stay on tasks. Our perception is going to be altered. And this is really how we understand or interpret things. Perception is kind of our awareness, our comprehension of something. It's how we react to things. And as a result of the crisis, this is going to change. There are also some physical experiences. People are experiencing increased and decreased appetite. There's insomnia. People are feeling really exhausted, muscle tension, lots of aches and pains that maybe previously you might not have experienced. Folks are experiencing some sleep problems. They're waking up early. They're maybe having difficulty staying asleep. There's hypervigilance. By what we mean by that is feeling kind of jumpy, kind of anxious, kind of on guard. The feeling overall and sometimes this overwhelming stress during this particular infectious disease outbreak can include excessive fear and worry about your own health, about the health of your loved ones, worry and fear about worsening of chronic health conditions, whether they're yours or, again, your loved ones, things like asthma or diabetes or autoimmune disorders. Feeling alone or living alone. Certainly, for many of us, the challenges of working from home. With regard to work, there's boundaries between home life and work life. Those things can become blurred when everything's happening all in the same place. That's what's kind of helped us previously kind of stay more healthy. The fact that we had this separateness. There was work and then there was home life. Right now, people are experiencing sharing continuously their space with other family members. They may start to feel like they can't really focus on work tasks because they have to attend to children or kids that are, doing e-learning at home or other domestic kind of tasks. So there really isn't that kind of separateness. It adds to your work stress. There's also the blending of kind of home and work life. And what can often happen is people end up actually spending more hours than normal working. Other stresses can include the use of alcohol, tobacco, and illicit drugs or other prescription medications. There's a lot of disruption in your daily routine, and then just worrying about the things that are going on in our world right now. Everybody's going to react very differently to stress. People who may struggle with stress include people who feel more vulnerable, such as older people, people with chronic diseases who are at a higher risk for COVID-19, younger folks, children, teens, or individuals with special needs, people that are caring for vulnerable family members, people who've had previous experiences in these sorts of extreme situations, people who are helping with the response to COVID-19, like doctors, other healthcare providers, our first responders, and people with mental health conditions that might include substance use problems. So our past ways of coping may not be working now, or they just might not be available to us, such as gathering together for socializing with friends, or for a lot of people dealing with stress, they might go to the gym or do other sorts of things. So really it's important to accept that right now, stress levels are going to be much more higher than normal. And how you respond to that is really going to depend on your own experiences, your background, the things that make you different than other people. So the community you live in, the culture you come from, your resources, things like that. It's okay to grieve. There's a lot of going on, thinking about missed opportunities, travel plans that are not going to come to fruition, certain freedoms you are no longer able to experience, time with loved ones, certain financial securities, those life milestones, things like graduation, weddings, births, going off to college, getting a first job, normal celebrations that might be going on. One of the really important things to keep in mind is trying to think about and accept the fact that the way the world was is probably not going to be that way anymore. The fact that we need to try to adapt. Also understand that grief is really transient, so it's going to kind of ebb and flow. You're going to experience times where you're going to feel extreme moments of sadness or mourning. And then there's going to be moments of acceptance or contentment, or you might even experience some happiness. But just understand that these things will fluctuate. There's no normal way to cope with a crisis. Some people are going to withdraw. Some people sleep a lot. Lots of people don't want to be alone. Some people do want to be alone. Again, some people can't sleep. Some people have trouble getting tasks done, or even completing tasks, or getting tasks started. Some people are really laser focused and they stay very busy. Again, everybody copes very differently. So you may feel like, wow, some people are really superstars, but overall, most people are really just trying to do the best that they can and really just stay afloat. It's really important to remember that we are very resilient. Remembering that we have capabilities and we've had the ability to get us through tough times before. So sometimes thinking about, how did I get through that divorce? Or what did I do when I lost my job? Emotionally, how did I kind of take care of myself? How did I heal and recover? We all have these capabilities because we've all managed to do and get past some really tough things. So again, that's what resilience is, and we are resilient, and it's important to try to remember that.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that informative information. And I encourage everybody, as you are listening, please feel free to put your questions in the chat room. Again, we will make sure that we are collecting those, and we'll leave time at the end to ask questions of both Lisa and Roseann. So speaking of Roseann, I would like to introduce you to Roseann Addams, who is an alumna of the UIC Jane Addams College of Social Work, and for more than 30 years has helped people discover new ways to thrive and inspire them to succeed and flourish. Welcome, Roseann. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is I'm honored to be here, but I really wish we weren't talking about what we're going to be talking about. We've been now 6 weeks into the stay-at-home orders in Illinois, and we're all really figuring this out day by day. When I'm faced with difficult situations in life, I often go back to things that I've read that have inspired me, and there's no book that feels more relevant to what's happening now than Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. So his quote is a short quote, but it just helps me remember how we're all going to get through this. And that is, for the world is in a bad state, but everything will become still worse unless each of us does our best. So it's a tall order, but it's really the thing that's going to get us through. So from the beginning of life in this time of coronavirus, we've been instructed to practice social distancing. Social distancing. So as a social worker and a therapist, I help people develop healthy, growth-producing social connections. So every time I've heard this word social distancing, I've had a strong negative reaction to this instruction. Social distancing. So we as humans are social creatures, and we thrive in healthy connection. So I'd like to suggest that we change the instruction from social distancing to physical distancing with social connection. You can see the picture on the slide is a picture from Italy, one of the countries that has suffered greatly from this pandemic. And at the time, one of the things that happened there was in many cities, people would gather on their balconies and sing, because Italians are not used to social distancing, and they found a way to cope by being together. And you can see this has traveled throughout the world now. You know, there are certain times in the city, I think it's 7 o'clock, where people in the city near Northwestern Hospital gather on their balcony and make noises and cheer the doctors and nurses. It's a way that we can express a sense of social solidarity, because that's the thing that's going to get us through this. So as we go through this day by day and things change moment by moment, think about, how can we express social connection when we have to keep our physical distance? Isolation is really hazardous to our health. If you think about, what's the absolute worst punishment one can give, it's solitary confinement. As we're living now, we're cut off from so many of our relationships and social networks. And what are the ways that we can keep our physical distance and keep connected to each other? Now that we're wearing masks and we're walking down the street 6 feet away from each other, and the experience often is that when you come upon another human being, it's almost like they're the enemy. This is going to have an effect on our mental health unless we do a deliberate act to counteract these negative feelings and the effect of isolation. We're living in what I call deep mud. The poet John Keats had a quote it's about negative capability, which I won't get into now, but the quote is beautiful. It's when one is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, and doubts, without irritable reaching after fact or reason. I moved the words around a little bit because I could never remember uncertainties, mysteries, and doubts in that order. So I rearranged them. So it's mud. We are living in mud, a time of mystery, uncertainty, and doubt. We can all try to figure out where this virus came from and who's responsible. And we're still struggling with finding the treatment and the vaccine and how much longer this will go. We're asking ourselves, when will we get our lives back? How will we do what we need to do to survive and recover? What if all of this gets worse before it gets better? And am I doing enough to protect myself and others? So we're in the mud. And I think we have to just accept that we're in the mud. And fighting for answers won't help us survive at this moment. We need to instead practice radical acceptance and accept what isn't possible. Lisa went through a whole list of things that we're missing, that we're grieving, that we, and who knows what tomorrow may bring of more losses, of things that we won't be able to enjoy and celebrate, and this deep sense of disconnection from each other. The important thing is, how do we figure out the ways to spread the joy of life? That's a grandiose expression at this time, joy of life, but people are doing it. I just heard about today a group of fashion students who were designing protective clothing for nurses and doctors because the hospital had run out. And inside the labels, the students had embroidered positive words so that when the doctors or nurses put on the protective gear, they would see these positive messages. So these are the ways, these small ways. We have to really be creative because, as Lisa explained, the ways we're used to connecting, the simple ways that we would take for granted, are just simply not available to us now. But finding joy in this time is the only way we're going to get through it. We have to balance informed reality with examples of hope and the power of positive connection. Now, I hope I don't sound like a naive Pollyanna here about this, emphasis on positive connection. But we are all bombarded with the sad news about the increasing numbers of positive cases now that the testing is increasing, and the dire worst case scenario predictions. And now we're even experiencing another episode of divide in our country as people stand on different sides of, opening up the country or continuing at stay-at-home orders. This is a hard time. So we have to keep looking for these places where stories of people overcoming this struggle, the division, the pain, people being creatively generous to others and finding ways to help each other through. So what are some of the sources of joy and connection that have helped you get through this? And how have you shared positive joy and positive energy to those with whom you interact? So making time for joy. Shoring up our reserves of joy and positive energy restores our strength to deal with the demands of responding responsibly in this time. So we have to think about, certainly Netflix has many offerings, and many theaters and performances are going online. So it's not irresponsible. It's not like you're not attending to things if you make time for joy. It's the only way you're going to get through this. Because while we do have to know what's going on in the world, and we do have to take the precautions and take this seriously, pleasure and joy and beauty is what's going to get us through. The other thing is touch. We're all a little bit touch deprived. I think Anthony Fauci said that handshakes are going to be disappeared from the way that we greet each other. And we're all going to grieve some of that, you know, the hugs, and certainly in Italy, people just kiss each other as a greeting. I'm sure that will be not the way it's done anymore. But if you're fortunate enough to be sheltering in place with another person, a pet, make time for touch. Touching someone releases dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin, and all this can boost our mood and curb depression. It's also been shown to drop a person's level of cortisol, the stress hormone, and strengthen the immune system. So find time, if there's a handhold, a snuggle, a hug. And if you're living alone, watching movies of people, you know, holding each other, touching each other, those images can help get you through. Your mirror neurons will start firing when you see that. Lisa talked about resilience. She ended her talk about mentioning the word resilience. So what is resilience? It's the ability to mentally, emotionally, and physically recover from a crisis. What we're going to get to on the other side, we're not quite sure, but there will be some recovery. And the truth is, nobody does resilience alone. So we come back to this social distancing. It's not social distancing. It's social connection and physical distancing. So we have to stay socially connected to others and figure out creative ways to connect when in-person visits haven't been possible. You know, I'm trying to think of an example of resilience that is alone, and I just can't think of one. You know, sometimes, what was the movie with Tom Hanks? The one about the basketball. He even found connection there with the basketball. So sometimes, though, social support just isn't enough, and protecting your emotional and mental health is just as important as protecting your physical health. So while we can recognize that everybody is suffering from anxiety, we also have to recognize sometimes what we're suffering from is just too much to do alone. Many therapists are offering teletherapy sessions now, and so Psychology Today has a website where you can find people who have openings, and insurance companies in Illinois are approving teletherapy sessions. So if you feel like you have a need, don't suffer alone. Find someone and get some help. And the other piece of this, the last piece, is what will we keep? The lessons of this loss and change in the time of coronavirus have taught us a lot. They've taught us how little we need, how very much we have, and how important it is to share, and the undeniable truth of our connection to each other and everything on earth. So in some ways, you know, when we look around when I look out my window and I see the peace, the absolute peace of the city, I think, you know, I'm going to kind of miss this when we all go back to regular life. But I think what we have to think about is, what are the lessons we're going to keep? What will we take with us when we all go back to moving freely and fully back into our lives? So I guess I'm going to close now for questions.
Thank you so much. I couldn't remember the name of the movie, but luckily numerous people on the call are able to remember that it was Castaway. I could just remember
Castaway, right.
the ball was Wilson, so that was not going to be very helpful to say just Wilson. Thank you so much to both of you for this wonderful discussion. There's so many great tips and thoughts, and I do have a couple questions that are coming at me, and again, please continue to put them in the chat and I'll make sure that we get to them. But if we could start with the first question, which is, what is an appropriate amount of news to consume, and when does it become too little or too much? For either one of you.
So what I have told clients that I'm working with is you really have to think about it in terms of what are some things you want to limit in your diet when you're trying to stay healthy. And I think limiting news consumption is an essential part of staying healthy, particularly now. So I will often encourage clients to maybe just check in with the news, you know, whether you like to do it in the morning or in the evening, or maybe you just have some online subscriptions to things, but really just do it once a day. And try to avoid any more than that, because it is absolutely overwhelming and it's very repetitive. And let's face it, there's not a lot of good news going on. I know one of the slides, we talked about some other resources about, you know, some lighter things. So I have encouraged lots of clients to try to check those sorts of things. Good News Network, there's a few other things that's at the end of the PowerPoint that is, again, just lighter to consume so you don't feel kind of that heaviness. But to answer the question, I would say once a day is plenty for most folks.
Yeah, I would agree.
Great, thank you. Another question. How, as an employer, can you ascertain how your employees are really doing when you're working remotely and how they're coping?
I think asking them, first of all, and letting them know that it's okay for them to not be doing ideally. You know, sometimes people working from home have this, you know, they're struggling, they're wondering if they're going to even keep their job. Fearful about expressing some difficulties that they're having. I think, you know, giving permission and understanding and empathy for how very difficult this time is, and recognizing that everybody's going to respond to this differently. As Lisa said in her presentation, you know, if people have trauma in their background or mental health issues, this is going to be even more difficult. You know, people who maybe family members are losing their jobs, feelings of insecurity. So to really find ways to check in with people individually, maybe, and give them permission, and also have some ideas about, as an employer, how you might respond supportively.
It's really helpful. Great, thank you. We have a guest on the call who said, I'm one of those folks who keeps waking up early, meaning getting 5 to 6 hours of sleep per night. Any suggestions?
So just understand that this is a really normal response. And certainly there are some things that might help overall. Of course, trying to get out or engage in some kind of physical activity. And if you don't feel like being outside is okay for you, then, you know, maybe doing some things in your house, in your home, in your living room. There's plenty of YouTube videos for exercises or yoga or anything like that. So physical activity is number one. Number two, make sure you're eating healthy foods to the best of your ability. Limiting caffeine. So when you're getting, you know, 5 hours of sleep, you tend to feel really tired, particularly later in the afternoon. So trying to limit your caffeine intake, and alcohol. Alcohol will absolutely disrupt your sleep. In the short term, it kind of makes you feel, drowsy and really comfortable. But a little bit later, one of the sort of opposite effects it has on you is it disrupts your sleep. So managing or limiting alcohol, caffeine, making sure you're getting some exercise, eating as healthy as you possibly can, should be all ways that you can help with your sleep issues.
So I'd like to add also that, so let's say that you do wake up at 5 a.m. This is not the time to turn on CNN.
Yes.
Or some news program. This is the time to maybe find a book of poetry or read something that you've been meaning to read, and maybe even read something boring that might help put you back to sleep. But resist the urge to turn on the TV to a news program that's only going to get you more agitated.
And to add to that, Roseann, I think it's a great addition there. Avoid anything with a screen on it, because that's going to actually sort of activate your brain,
right?
And thinking that, okay, it is time to wake up. So don't pick up your phone, don't open up your tablet or your laptop. Like you said, you're probably a little better off trying to read something, actually printed word on paper. Mm-hmm. Some people feel, like for them, it's a time for them to meditate or pray or do anything that kind of
journal. Right.
Yeah.
Wake up and journal. Remember this time.
Yeah. Those sorts of things.
I think it's a really good point, especially because generations from now will be asking all of us about what was it like.
Right.
And so to be able to have those reflections is really important, because it's hard to see it when you're in it. So
right.
Great. Another question. As a current social work student, I'm anticipating that the field placements and instruction will continue to look much different than it has been in the past. What resources would you recommend to students that might help prepare them to be able to engage with our future clients remotely through telehealth mechanisms? I'm going to repeat it, it was long.
Do you want to do that one, Lisa? You're the faculty member.
That's going to be really interesting. I think there are certain, and this is going to apply to just, again, a small group of folks, but actually I would maybe, in the effort of keeping this timely, if that person wanted to email me, I would be very happy to have this this discussion, and I could suggest some very specific things. I just don't think it's a good use of time because it's going to apply only to a very small portion of folks. So whoever you are, I'm happy to answer that question if you email me, and my contact information is in the PowerPoint.
Also, if you'd like to email me, I can tell you how quickly I had to go from in-person sessions to conducting therapy by Zoom. It's been quite a transition.
For sure.
That's wonderful. And actually the person wrote back and said, that'd be awesome. Thank you. So I think she will do that.
Okay, cool.
Another question. I'm quoting, of course, I'm disappointed to see that shelter in place has become a productivity contest for some. I mostly see this on social media. How can we help change that type of thinking?
One is maybe stay off social media. If you look at people's lives on social media, everybody's eating at 5-star restaurants and wearing designer clothing. And, maybe we're all not doing that. So enjoy the time. I think this is not the time you have to set up impossible goals for yourself. This is a hard time. So if you manage to clean out one closet, good for you. Take the rest of the day off.
Small rewards, I love it. Another question. What steps can we take now to protect ourselves from long-term mental or emotional negative effects from isolation?
I think everything that Roseann talked about, it's one thing for the physical distancing, but remaining socially connected and physically and mentally as healthy as you can is really going to be the key to that. So in whatever way you can, And I don't know, Roseann, if you have some additional thoughts about that.
Well, I think we have to be realistic that this is going to affect us. Just like, you know, maybe if you're old enough, you have family members who lived through the Depression and maybe hoarded things because they were afraid they'd run out. You know, we're going to have an experience, we're going to have an effect of this. I mean, I keep thinking there's going to be an increase in the number of people who suffer from agoraphobia after this. Anxiety, the feeling of, you know, stress. You know, what's it going to take for us to feel like it's fine to go to the grocery store without a mask on? And then the other thing of the mask, wearing masks, you know, our mirror neurons are being starved for connection. This is going to have an effect. And I think we have to be especially responsive to kids who are going through this and recognize that we're all going to need some help after this is over. And, you know, let's find ways to get it and not pretend we can just survive this. You know, resilience means recognizing what you've been through. It doesn't mean just forgetting it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, not to be cliche or anything, but I've been seeing these memes where it's talking about the extroverts of the world, and I'm an extreme extrovert. As soon as you release this, we'll go out and hug everybody that we can possibly come in contact with, but that's actually the complete opposite from exactly what you're talking about. From that standpoint, it won't be acceptable. And I think if I were to try and hug somebody, they naturally would jump back, which.
Right. And we're going to have to figure out new ways. You know, I think the casual expressions of affection are not going to be so prevalent in our society anymore.
Right. And just, yeah, please, Lisa.
I was just going to add, you know, I think when you even just think about when we greet somebody or you even pass somebody on the street, just facial expressions.
Exactly.
That we exchange. You smile, like we smile at little children, or just, you know, again, as you're walking past somebody, you smile at them. So having masks and having, you know, face covering now, you don't experience that. So I think you're absolutely right, Roseann. We are kind of, you know, in a very different world right now in terms of being starved of some of those, you know, very subtle social interactions, and they're going to look, you know, way more different.
And I think even more, you know, while we're wearing masks and we're walking outside and keeping our social distance, to find a way to give some physical gesture that says, hello, I'm not the enemy, I greet you, I see you. What do we all long for in life is to be seen, to be recognized, to be appreciated. And so now we're walking around with masks, and, you know, we're missing a lot of cues of connection.
Really interesting points. Another question from somebody that has joined us. How do you help a client when you're suffering similar or the same issues?
I think empathizing and trying to kind of normalize the fact that, you know what, I have felt anxious. I personally have had trouble sleeping, appetite disturbances, things like that. Just really trying to validate their feelings, empathize with them, and normalize it. Because I think maybe as Roseann was saying, I can barely think of a person that has not had some negative emotional effect. Now, to a varying degree. There are some people this affects them just mildly, and then there are other people that this has really, really strongly impacted them. So just normalizing those things, and everybody's feelings, no matter what it is, are valid for this particular point in our lives, because nobody's experienced this before.
Mm-hmm. And I think those of us in the helping professions have to get help ourselves. You know, after a full day of Zoom appointments, you know, what I need to do is find a way to replenish my sense of hope and my sense of, you know, strength and resilience, and, you know, recognizing that we all need to be filled up again. This is draining work.
For sure.
Yeah, really important points, because you are in the helping profession. So as you are helping, it is, if you're not good yourself, then how can you really help others? So
right.
Really good advice. So another participant has asked, I'm lucky enough to be working remotely during this time. Should I feel guilty about wanting to take a mental health or personal time off day, even though I'm already at home?
No,
Absolutely not.
no, no.
Right, right, right.
It's a funny thought because you're home. So where are you going? People know you're not really going anywhere.
But you
But
need time away from the screens. You need time
Yeah.
away from the phones. You need a day off. And I think many of us who are working from home end up working more. You know, there's no discrete, I'm leaving the office now. And the phone calls and the emails and the Zoom scheduling is, you know, it can be constant. So definitely this is a time when you can set boundaries, talk to your boss about what you need. And again, you know, there's a lot of insecurity because people are worried about their jobs and feeling like now they have to give 120% to prove their worth. And so, you know, think about your situation, and if there's a little bit of space, take it.
The only thing that comes to my mind is I'm sure this is not a unique problem for the people that are in the deaf and hard of hearing community. So I would certainly try to seek out resources from
Yeah,
other people that experience kind of the same thing. But for sure, this is another hurdle and another barrier for somebody that is deaf or hard of hearing or hearing impairments without being able to see or read lips.
yeah, another requirement to overcome that isolation. Yeah.
Right.
But I think Lisa's point is, you know, ask the community. I'm sure they're going to have much more creative ideas than those of us who aren't struggling with this difficulty.
Right. Here's another question from someone who says, I have friends who've lost their jobs and I feel guilty that I'm still working. How do I deal with this?
That's survivor's guilt, right? So, you know, I think the way we can deal with it is if we can be generous, to be generous. You know, maybe you send a carry-out dinner to somebody's house, or you offer to pay something that that won't put you in you know, difficult financial situation yourself. I think just think about how you can be generous, and think about how you can offer that person something, some support, whether that's, you know, somebody looking at their resume or thinking about creatively, you know, where else, what could they do during this time, and what resources might you have that can help them get connected to another job.
Okay. Here's another one. How can I help a client who's a senior who lives with someone who isn't following the stay-at-home order? They say they aren't practicing physical distancing and they're leaving the house to hang out with friends. Any ideas for an individual session?
Is the question about an individual session for therapy, or I'm not sure the question.
Well, it doesn't specify, well, therapy, they say therapy, but maybe for the greater audience too, you know, how do you deal with not only clients, but friends or relatives who aren't adhering to those policies?
This is a pretty common complaint. You know, I've heard this in people that I'm working with, especially those who are, you know, more anxious and more concerned about the spread of the germs, living with somebody who's a little, what they experience as reckless. And I think, you know, encouraging the person to appeal to the less careful person in a way that is not about blame or criticism, but more about asking for support, like saying, you know, here's what I need to feel safe. I know this might be more than you think is necessary, but when you don't wash your hands when you come in from outside, or when you go visit people, it makes me feel less safe and doesn't make me feel like you're supporting me through this time. I don't know if that helps. Anything you would add, Lisa?
No, I would say the same thing, and just really just try to appeal to them. Like, absolutely, don't shame or blame them, but just say, you know, this is a very real concern for me as an older individual, as a health compromised person. And, you know, when I know that you're out and about and you're not necessarily, you know, doing things as I would do, it makes me feel very vulnerable, or it causes me, you know, to have a lot of stress and anxiety around my safety.
Here's another question that might be a little repetitive from what we've had in the past, but how can we help others who are struggling? What are some ways to reach out and start a conversation?
I think asking how they're struggling first, you know, finding out what would help them. Is it possible to provide what would help them? Sometimes just listening. Empathy and listening goes a long way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Compassion. And again, as Roseann said earlier, for the person that had the job and they were sort of feeling that survivor's guilt, you know, if you have the ability and you have the capacity to help out, you know, to send a meal or something like that, then please do so. But asking the person, you know, is there something that I can do to help you? And again, if you have that capability. The other thing is, if you're somebody that's really good at locating resources within the community, or encouraging them to make contact with, you know, their utility company or their credit card companies to arrange for, you know, bill deferment, things like that.
Or even making the calls for them.
Yeah, some people don't realize that you can do that. So helping them, you know, do some research and access some resources around those things, because they may be just so overwhelmed with the fact that they are struggling that they kind of feel frozen. And this may be an incredibly intelligent, fully functioning human being that, you know, 3 or 4 months ago was doing everything. But now, because of the stress and feeling so overwhelmed, you know, feels just stuck, kind of in that mud, as you described, and just, you know, isn't able to do things. So helping them do some things might be really, really useful.
Okay. So we just have about 5 minutes, so I'll read this one last question. If anyone has any others, feel free to shout them out and we can respond via email afterwards. But I'm an exercise physiologist, personal trainer, and wellness coach who works with cancer survivors and individuals who are immunocompromised. They're trying to figure out how to reach out and support them during this time and beyond. They've been able to transition to virtual training with apparently healthy individuals, but not those with health issues. Any thoughts?
So why not virtual with the people with health issues? I guess I'm not sure why not.
Well, my guess is because they're immunocompromised, but feel free to jump back in the chat.
My guess,
clarify, yeah.
So my thought would be, it would be almost no different than kind of doing, you know, leading somebody through, and this obviously is not my area of expertise, leading somebody through to the best of their ability some of these physical exercises, like through Zoom or some other sort of video communication. I guess I'm confused why that might not work.
Yeah.
Okay. Here she says she works with them through the hospital that they work at, but the wellness center has closed. The program is funded through grants.
Oh, so the funding is the issue. Yeah.
Oh, and this person now has no contact.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if they were able and could contact them individually and it's not any sort of workplace violation, or, you know, maybe that's a way that they could reach out. or perhaps do their own little exercise video and then just
Send it
kind of
out.
send it out. Yeah. So that they're not doing sort of face to face, but I don't know if that's
Yeah, they say
practical.
they had thought about doing that. So sounds like you're kind of on the same page.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we're just about out of time. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts and your expertise with us. I'm going to quickly share a screen with some resources on it so everybody can take a peek at it. But with that, I think we're all done. Thanks for everyone for participating. Check us out at go.uic.edu/alumni exchange. We'll have recordings of our sessions out there and you can register for new ones. So enjoy your Wednesday, everybody.
Hope I'm joining. I jumped back in, and I'm sorry that I lost all of you, but thank you again. If I just add my thanks, and join us tomorrow for our second Alumni Exchange program at noon, where we are and where we are going regarding COVID-19, presented by Dr. Mark Jorkin, one of our own epidemiologists and faculty members in UIC School of Public Health. And thanks again, and I apologize again that I froze up. That's another fun stress thing of all of this. So, but thank you, Lisa and Roseann, and thank you to everybody that called in. Very much appreciate all of your time and expertise. And thanks, Jessica, for jumping in.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a great day. Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.